There is a moment of silence before the sound begins, a stillness that feels almost sacred. You study every night, but your words disappear the moment you try to speak. You watch movies, but they sound like noise. You understand grammar, but still feel dumb. You smile in front of others, but deep inside, you hate how your English makes you feel small. And then, a sudden realization strikes like lightning. What if the way you've been learning English is not helping you at all, but quietly destroying your confidence? The books, the flashcards, the endless grammar rules. They trained you to remember, not to speak. You tried everything, gave your best, but English never gave love back. Maybe the problem was never you. Maybe it was the method itself. Once, there was a young dreamer who failed every test until he stopped memorizing and started listening to stories. Because when your brain feels emotion, it remembers forever. That was the secret. English isn't a subject. It's a story waiting to be felt. And that story begins here, inside a quiet corner of the world called the Control English, where English is not just learned, it is lived. This is not another classroom. This is a transformation, a real one, told through the extraordinary journey of a startup that dared to dream beyond money, beyond fame, beyond fear. In this story, you'll discover how emotion becomes memory, how failure turns into power, and how stories can teach what schools forgot. You'll understand every word through feeling. You'll remember faster because of emotion, and you'll start speaking naturally, without translation, without fear. Imagine walking into a cafe and ordering your favorite coffee with confidence. Imagine understanding every word of your favorite song. Imagine someone turning to you, surprised, and asking, "Where did you learn to speak like that?" That's what this journey is about. If you've ever felt stuck, this is your moment. Take a deep breath, let your doubts fade, and step into a world where learning feels alive. This is the Control English, and your story starts now. With Beyond Billionaires, the story of a startup. Lesson 1. It begins with silence. The kind of silence that sits before a dream is born. Somewhere in a small town, far from the polished lights of Silicon Valley, a young man stares at a blank notebook. He doesn't have investors, he doesn't have a co-founder, and he certainly doesn't have $1 million idea yet. But what he does have is a whisper, an inner voice that keeps saying, "You can build something that changes lives." He doesn't know what it means, but he decides to listen. This story is not about billionaires or billion-dollar companies. It's about the spark before the storm. It's about what happens before the headlines. When someone ordinary decides to do something extraordinary. At that moment, he takes his first note. 3 words. Build. Learn. Share. That simple line becomes the seed of his startup. A company that would one day teach the world how to dream differently. Lesson 2. Every great story begins with a struggle. For weeks, the young dreamer tries to find what his idea truly means. He works late nights, searching the internet, reading about innovation, and studying English podcasts to improve his confidence. He knows that success starts with communication. If he can speak clearly, he can think clearly. That's where his real journey begins. He practices simple phrases like, "I believe in my idea," and "I can do this." These sentences become his daily mantras. The truth is, no one believed him. His friends laughed, his parents were confused. But deep down, he had already decided. Failure would not define him. Learning would. Every mistake, every rejection, Every awkward presentation became his classroom. His startup didn't begin with an office or a logo. It began with his voice, a voice that said, "Maybe I'm not perfect in English, but my dream speaks louder." Lesson 3. As days turned into months, something changed. He started seeing opportunities in problems. When others complained about slow internet in rural areas, he saw a market. When students struggled to access online education, he saw a mission. That's when his idea started to take shape, a platform built not just for profits, but for people. His startup wouldn't just sell a product, it would solve a problem that mattered. He called it Beyond, because he wanted everyone who joined to go beyond their limits, beyond fear, beyond excuses, beyond self-doubt. The first version of his platform was simple, a website with only a few lessons. But behind that simplicity was fire. He coded through the night, slept for 3 hours, woke up again, and continued. Coffee became his companion, silencing his teacher. But every dream has its test. Just when things started to work, his website crashed, his savings disappeared. The people who once ignored him now called him foolish. That night, he sat alone, staring at the flickering light of his computer screen. For a moment, he thought of giving up. But then, he remembered why he started, not for money, not for fame, but for the people who needed a chance. And in that moment, he whispered again, "Build. Learn, share lesson 4. Morning breaks over the city skyline. But for him, it's just another quiet dawn filled with caffeine and code." His startup, Beyond, still has no investors, no marketing team, no luxury office, only belief. Every keystroke feels like a heartbeat. Every bug he fixes feels like another small victory against the impossible. While others dream of vacations and comfort, he dreams of one more working prototype that doesn't crash at sunrise. The truth about every startup is that it's built on invisible sacrifices. Nobody sees the skipped meals, the broken laptops, or the lonely birthdays. Yet these are the hidden currencies that buy growth. One morning, while watching the sunlight reflect on his window, he realizes that every challenge he's facing is shaping his character. He's not just building software, he's building himself. Lesson 5. A breakthrough finally arrives when he decides to share his story online. He records a short video on his old phone, speaking directly to students who, like him, come from small towns. His voice shakes, his grammar isn't perfect, but the emotion is raw. He says, "If you're waiting for permission to begin, you'll wait forever. Start now, even if you're scared." That video spreads like wildfire. Messages pour in from young learners, dreamers, and first-time founders who see themselves in him. They call his message real, not polished, not corporate, but human. Within weeks, his small community becomes a global tribe. The startup that once felt invisible begins to glow. He learns that authenticity is more powerful than advertising. In a world chasing perfection, truth becomes his biggest advantage. Growth brings chaos. The more people join his platform, the more problems appear. Servers fail, users complain, and sleepless nights return. He realizes that success isn't the end of struggle. It's the beginning of bigger ones. But instead of feeling defeated, he chooses curiosity. Each failure becomes a lesson. Each angry email becomes feedback. He starts hiring not experts from elite universities, but passionate learners who remind him of himself. Together, they form a small, fiery team that believes in purpose over paycheck. They share the same dream: to make learning and opportunity accessible to everyone. Late-night meetings turn into storytelling sessions. Every bug fix becomes a celebration. They laugh, they argue, they grow. Not as a company, but as a family of believers. Lesson 7. Months later, Beyond finally attracts its first investor. A quiet woman in her 50s who had once been a teacher. She tells him, "I'm not investing in a product. I'm investing in a mission." Her words shake him more than any check could. It's validation, not from the market, but from the heart. The funding allows them to expand, better servers, a small office, and real equipment. But he keeps one rule: never lose the soul of the dream. Every Monday, he begins their meetings with the same phrase that started it all: build, learn, share. The team repeats it like a prayer. It reminds them that they aren't chasing billions. They're chasing change. Lesson 8. Fame arrives quietly. Journalists begin writing about the small-town founder changing education. Invitations come from conferences, podcasts, and universities. For the first time, he stands on a stage, facing thousands of faces. The bright lights make him nervous, but when he begins to speak, his voice doesn't shake anymore. He says, "I'm not here because I was the smartest. I'm here because I refuse to quit." His words echo across the hall. Students record, teachers clap, and somewhere in the crowd, a young boy decides to start his own idea that night. That's when the founder finally understands what Beyond really means. It's not just a startup, it's a movement, a reminder that anyone, from anywhere, can rise above limits when they dare to believe. Lesson 9. Success feels good until it starts to demand more than it gives. The startup is growing faster than he ever imagined. Thousands of users are signing up daily. The servers are barely keeping up. The small team works night and day, eating instant noodles between meetings, sleeping on beanbags, and living on adrenaline. For a while, it feels like flying. But even flight has turbulence. He starts noticing the cracks. Team members argue, deadlines get missed. A few early supporters leave, saying the dream is growing too fast. He feels the weight of leadership pressing down on him, that silent, heavy expectation to always have the answers. Yet some nights, when the office lights dim, he sits alone and whispers to himself, "I'm still learning." That honesty becomes his anchor. Lesson 10. Then comes the storm. A competitor launches a similar platform, backed by millions of dollars and a full marketing army. Overnight, investors start calling him, asking if Beyond can survive. Users drift away, curious about the shiny new product. News articles compare the two startups, painting him as the underdog. For the first time, fear replaces excitement. He feels the same silence that began his journey, but now it's heavier. His team looks at him for answers, but he doesn't have any. He spends a long night on the rooftop, watching the city lights flicker, feeling the distance between dreams and reality. He realizes that the true test of an entrepreneur isn't how high he climbs, but how he stands when the world shakes beneath him. Lesson 11. The next morning, he walks into the office with calm determination. He gathers his team and says, "We can't outspend them, but we can outlove them. Let's make every user feel like they matter." The energy shifts. They stop chasing numbers and start focusing on stories. Every email, every message, every lesson shared by a learner becomes their heartbeat. They create a new section on the platform, Beyond Stories. where users can share how the startup changed their lives. Within days, hundreds of stories flood in. A girl who learned English to get her first job, a boy who built an app after watching their free lessons, a mother who finally learned to use technology to teach her kids. These stories don't just bring users back, they bring faith back. Lesson 12, months pass, and the storm settles. Beyond not only survives, but thrives. The competitor fades, unable to match the passion of a team driven by purpose. Media calls it the return of the underdog. But inside the office, there are no celebrations, only gratitude. The founder knows that the greatest wins are not on paper, but in the people who refuse to give up. He starts mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the lessons he learned the hard way. That courage is a daily decision, not a one-time event. That failure is feedback, not the end. And that belief is the most powerful currency. He tells them, dream big, but stay kind. Grow fast, but never forget where you began. His voice now carries the weight of experience, but also the gentleness of humility. Lesson 13. And then, life brings him full circle. One afternoon, he visits his hometown, the same small town where his dream began with a blank notebook. The roads are still dusty, the cafe still plays the same songs, and the same school children walk past him with curious eyes. He sits on a bench outside the library, holding that old notebook in his hands. The 3 words are still there. Build, learn, share. As he looks around, he notices something beautiful. A small learning center with the Beyond logo painted on the wall. Inside, a group of kids is watching one of his English learning videos. They don't know he's standing right outside. For a moment, tears fill his eyes. He doesn't interrupt. He just smiles. Because that's the moment every dreamer lives for. To see the ripple of their belief touching lives they'll never meet. Lesson 14. Global attention always begins quietly, like a small spark before it becomes a fire. A journalist from London writes an article titled, "The Startup That Teaches the World to Dream." Overnight, international students begin signing up for Beyond. Emails flood in from Africa, India, and Europe. The platform that started in a tiny room now connects continents. The founder sits at his desk, watching names appear on the user dashboard, names from places he has never been, speaking languages he has never heard. Yet, somehow, they are all learning together. For the first time, he feels the true weight of his mission. It's no longer about one dreamer or one country. It's about creating access for all, breaking language, location, and background barriers. And deep inside, he whispers to himself, "We didn't just build a company. We built a bridge." Lesson 15. The growth is breathtaking. Universities partner with Beyond. NGOs reach out to translate their lessons into different languages. A major tech company offers collaboration. But with global expansion comes global responsibility. The founder finds himself juggling time zones, investor meetings, and technical upgrades all at once. Sleep becomes a rare luxury. His phone never stops buzzing. In those sleepless hours, he starts questioning himself. Has he become the kind of businessman he once promised never to be? Too busy to feel? Too tired to dream? But then he receives an email from a girl in Kenya. She writes, "Your lessons taught me English. Now I teach other children for free." He pauses and smiles. That single message reminds him that numbers measure growth, but impact measures purpose. Lesson 16. The startup moves into its first international office, a bright space filled with different accents, colors, and cultures. Each team member brings a unique story. Some are immigrants who once struggled to find jobs because of language barriers. Others are former students of Beyond. The founder looks at them and realizes, we are no longer just a company. We are a community of second chances. They create a new slogan, learning beyond borders. It becomes the heartbeat of their mission. Every Friday, the team gathers for Story Hour, a moment where they share stories of transformation from around the world. Some are joyful, some heartbreaking, but all are real. These stories remind them that they are not building technology. They are building human connection. Lesson 17. But even as success expands, the pressure grows heavier. Investors now want faster results, bigger profits, higher returns. The same people who once praised his vision now question his choices. Why focus so much on free lessons? They ask. You could be making millions more. He listens quietly, but inside, a war rages. He could take the easy path, raise prices, attract more luxury clients, and call it success. Or he could stay true to his mission, helping learners who can't afford premium education. That night, he walks alone through the empty office, lights dimmed, city asleep. He stands by the window and thinks of the children in small villages watching his videos, the mothers learning English after dinner, the dreamers practicing new words under streetlights. And he decides money will never be his language. Humanity will. Lesson 18. He announces a new initiative the next morning. Beyond Access, free learning for all. The boardroom goes silent. Some investors walk out. Some threaten to withdraw funding. But his team stands by him. They choose heart over profit. And once again, just like in the early days, they start rebuilding, slowly, fearlessly, together. The world takes notice. News outlets begin calling it the revolution of empathy. Millions join the platform within months. Donations pour in from unexpected places. Former critics now praise his courage. Yet, he remains grounded. He tells his team, never mistake fame for fulfillment. Our real success is invisible. It lives in the lives we change. And that's when he realizes something profound. The dream had gone beyond him. It no longer belonged to one man or one idea. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe that education and kindness could change the world. Lesson 19. The world now knows his name. News channels call him the teacher of dreamers. Governments invite him to speak about innovation. His once tiny startup becomes a global platform, millions of users, dozens of countries, hundreds of languages. Yet in the middle of all that applause, he feels something missing. Success, he learns, can be noisy, so loud that sometimes it hides the quiet truth inside. One evening, after another long conference, he returns to his hotel room and looks in the mirror. The man staring back at him is older, sharper, more confident, but his eyes still search for something deeper. He remembers the early nights of struggle, the broken laptop, the whisper that started it all. Somewhere along the journey, that whisper had turned into a shout. And now, he just wants to hear it again. He sits down and writes 3 lines in his journal. Never forget the beginning. Never lose the meaning. Never stop learning. Lesson 20. A year later, he started a mentorship program called the Founders Circle. Every month, he meets young entrepreneurs, students, small-town innovators, and dreamers with more hope than resources. He tells them his story without filters. The fear, the failures, the nights of doubt. They listen, not because he's famous, but because he's real. One student asks him, "What's the secret to building something that lasts?" He smiles and says, "Don't build for money. Build for moments." He explains that moments are what people remember. The first time someone learns a new word, the first message from a happy user, the first thank you letter. These are the real currencies of change. The students nod, taking notes, unaware that their teacher is still a student himself, still learning what it means to go beyond success. Lesson 21. But life has its way of testing even the strongest hearts. During a major expansion project, a technical failure wipes out months of data. The team panics. The platform goes offline for days. Headlines question the company's reliability. Investors demand answers. For the first time in years, he feels the same fear he felt when his first website crashed. History seems to be repeating itself. Yet this time, he's not alone. His team stands tall. His learners write messages of support. "We believe in you. We're waiting." Those words ignite his spirit. He gathers everyone and says, "We didn't come this far to quit. Let's rebuild, not just the code, but our courage," and they do. In 3 sleepless weeks, the system is restored. The users return, stronger and more loyal than ever. The failure that could have destroyed them instead reminds them who they are, not a billion-dollar empire, but a community of believers. Lesson 22. The years roll on. The founder's hair begins to gray, but his passion burns brighter. Beyond is now in 120 countries, used by schools, universities, and even government programs. Yet he still prefers sitting with his team in small circles. Listen to their stories, their laughter, their dreams. One evening, a young intern nervously tells him, "Sir, you're a billionaire now. How does it feel?" He laughs softly and replies, "If I am, it's not because of the money. It's because of the minds we've enriched." He looks around at his team, people from different backgrounds, religions, and languages, and realizes that this is what wealth looks like. The real billionaires, he thinks, are the ones who invest in others. Lesson 23. A decade after that first notebook, he decides to step back from daily operations. Not to retire, but to reflect. He begins traveling to small towns again, visiting classrooms and community centers, quietly observing the impact of his dream. Everywhere he goes, he meets people whose lives have been changed. A young woman teaching online, an elderly man learning English to speak to his grandchildren, a refugee who built a business after watching his motivational lessons. Each face tells him a story. Each handshake feels like a thank you from the universe. He no longer needs trophies or titles. The proof of his success lives in the people who carry his dream forward. Before leaving one of the centers, a little girl runs up to him and says, "Sir, I want to start something like you did." He smiles and replies, "Then promise me one thing. Start small, but think beyond." Lesson 24. Time changes everything. The way we look, the way we think, even the way we dream. Years pass, and the founder of Beyond now walks slower, speaks softer, and smiles more often. The office has grown beyond imagination. Glass walls, modern desks, digital screens flashing numbers that once seemed impossible. But inside, he still feels like that young man with a notebook and a cup of cold coffee, chasing something invisible but beautiful. One morning, as he walks through the office, he notices something that stops him. a group of new employees reading the words painted on the wall. Build, learn, share. He watches them nod with respect, unaware that the man standing nearby is the one who wrote those words years ago. A quiet pride fills his heart. He realizes that his dream no longer needs him to survive. It has found its own heartbeat. Lesson 25. The world now sees him as a legend. Awards, honorary doctorates, even documentaries are made about his journey. But behind the fame, he lives simply. He still takes time to answer emails from students. He still mentors young founders. He still carries that same old notebook in his bag, the one that started it all. One day, during a quiet interview, a journalist asks, "What's your proudest achievement?" He pauses, smiles, and says, "That somewhere, someone who never met me feels brave enough to start. Because of something we built." He explains that true legacy isn't built in bank accounts or buildings. It's built in hearts. It's not what people remember you for. It's what they remember you through. And that's the moment the journalist falls silent, realizing this isn't just a story of a man. It's a story of what humanity can become when purpose leads to profit. Lesson 26. As years roll on, he begins writing letters to his future self, a habit he started in the early days but had forgotten. Each letter begins with the same words, "Dear Dreamer." He writes about the lessons he's learned, that patience is the most underrated form of strength, that kindness is the foundation of all leadership, and that no dream is too small when it's fueled by service. He writes about mistakes too, about the people he lost touch with, the sleepless nights, and the moments when he almost gave up. But every page ends with hope. Hope that the next generation will dream braver, work smarter, and give more. One night, after finishing a letter, he places it inside his old notebook and whispers to himself, "You did it, but the world still has so much left to do." Lesson 27. A new chapter begins when his team launches Beyond 2.0, a reimagined version of the platform built entirely by the new generation. The founder decides not to interfere. He watches from a distance, proud and peaceful. The platform now uses AI, virtual classrooms, and real-time translation, things he could only imagine in the beginning. During the launch event, they surprise him by naming the main auditorium after him. When he walks onto the stage, the audience stands, clapping for minutes. But instead of giving a speech, he simply says, "Don't thank me. Thank the voice inside you that refuses to stay silent." That single line becomes the new tagline for the company. Across the world, billboards read, "Beyond, because every voice matters." The circle is complete. What began as one man's whisper has become a global chorus. Lesson 28. One evening, as the sun sets behind the city skyline, he returns once again to the rooftop where it all began. The air feels different now, gentler, wiser. The city below hums with life, and he realizes that everything he ever dreamed of was never about being rich or powerful. It was about being useful. He watches the lights turn on across the streets, classrooms, homes, cafes, each one glowing like a tiny dream. He closes his eyes and smiles. For the first time, there is no rush, no target, no fear, only gratitude. He whispers the words that shaped his life one final time. Build, learn, share. And in that moment, it feels as though the world whispers back. Lesson 29. The rooftop's silence feels sacred. The wind carries echoes of laughter, failure, hope, and everything in between. The founder looks at the skyline, not as a battlefield anymore, but as a classroom that taught him everything textbooks never could. He remembers the early struggles, the sleepless nights, the loans, the doubts, the rejections. And then he smiles, because all of it, every pain, every no, became part of something meaningful. He takes out his notebook for the last time. The pages are yellow, the ink fading. On the final page, he writes a single line. The world doesn't belong to those who never fail. It belongs to those who never stop learning. Then he closes it gently, knowing that somewhere, someone else will open a new one tomorrow. Lesson 30. A few months later, he's invited to speak at a global education summit. Thousands of young people from around the world gather, from small towns, villages, and cities, each carrying a spark of curiosity. When he steps onto the stage, the applause feels endless. But when the crowd finally settles, he says quietly, "Let's talk about failure." The audience laughs softly, surprised. He continues, "Everyone tells you how to win. No one teaches you how to fail. But that's where the real growth hides. Every time you fall, you don't lose, you learn. Every time someone doubts you, they're simply testing how much you believe in yourself." The hall falls silent. Every face listens, not to a businessman, but to a teacher. A teacher who has lived every word he speaks. Lesson 31. After the summit, letters begin to arrive, handwritten from all over the world. One from a small village in India, another from a student in Brazil, one from a refugee camp in Turkey. They all share one thing: gratitude. A girl from Kenya writes, "Your platform helped me learn English. Now I teach children in my village." A boy from Japan writes, "Your story made me start my first app." A man from Peru writes, "Your podcast gave me hope after I lost my job." He reads every single letter. Some he replies to, others he keeps in a box labeled Dreamers. And one evening, as he reads them under a soft desk lamp, tears quietly roll down his face, because now he understands. Success is not measured by how many people know your name, but by how many lives whisper it with love. Lesson 32. Time keeps moving. The company expands across continents, new languages, new innovations, new leaders, but the spirit remains the same: to help people learn, speak, and believe. The founder now spends most of his time teaching in small online classes. Simple, conversational lessons where he helps people express themselves in English. He often says, "Language is not just words. It's freedom. It's the bridge between your thoughts and the world." In those quiet sessions, he finds peace. The same man who once built an empire now finds joy in teaching simple greetings, helping someone say, "Hello, how are you?" for the first time with confidence. Sometimes greatness looks like small acts repeated with love. Lesson 33. Years pass. The world continues to evolve. New generations rise, speaking new ideas, new dreams. One afternoon, the founder is invited to record a final podcast episode. The closing message for Beyond. The studio is dimly lit. The microphone waits in silence. He takes a deep breath and begins. Maybe one day you'll feel lost. Maybe you'll doubt yourself. Maybe you'll think your dream is too small. But remember, every great story begins quietly. Don't chase fame. Chase growth. Don't compare. Contribute. And don't ever let fear make decisions for you. His voice cracks slightly, but he keeps going. If you're listening to this right now, remember, you are enough. You are capable. You are exactly where you need to be. Just keep going and go beyond. When he finishes, there's silence. But it's not empty. It's full of meaning. Lesson 34, months later, the world celebrates the 20th anniversary of Beyond. The event is grand. Live orchestras, films, speeches, lights. But somewhere in the back row, an older man watches quietly, smiling. He doesn't go on stage this time. He doesn't need to. The new generation takes the spotlight, young, fearless, and full of hope. A student walks up to him after the show and says, "Sir, I joined Beyond because of your story." He replies softly, "And I stayed because of yours." The torch has been passed. What began as a dream now lives in thousands of hearts, each carrying a piece of his journey forward. Lesson 35, the final lesson. Beyond Billionaires. Morning light fills the room. He wakes up early, as always. The world outside hums with life. He sits by the window with a cup of coffee, opens his old notebook once more, and reads the very first line he ever wrote. One day people will learn not for money, but for meaning. He smiles. Because that day has come. He looks out the window, children walking to school, adults learning new skills online, people sharing ideas across oceans. The dream has outgrown the dreamer. And in a whisper, he says, "Go. Build your own beyond." Not for fame, not for wealth, but because the world still needs dreamers who dare. The camera fades, the music swells, the notebook closes for the last time. But the story continues.